Hello and welcome to the Agents of Aquarius. I am Jim Pine. This is episode 718. Episode 18.
Don't start cursing about it.
And we're here. We're queer. We're in the new year. And I'm excited to be here with my co-host, Matt. Matt.
Don't curse.
I didn't curse. I almost said your last name. I don't know why we can't, but this is Matt Di Gregorio, and we are the Agents of Aquarius, and we're excited to be here to talk about the world, the universe, consciousness, everything we can scratch the itch of. That's what we do here, along with we scratch the eyes out of the 13 families in the committee of 300, the WEF. We will scratch the eyes out of all of them.
Oh yeah, man. Trace it back. We'll find out who these guys are.
This is us. We're here now for you. And then, in the words of Baba Yaga, Ooh.
Consciousness, bro. That's a topic right there.
It is a topic.
We've probably never talked about that before.
We definitely have. We never get really deep into consciousness. We never I mean, it's something kind of always just comes up because it's what if when you have consciousness, that means you're probably operating with a critical thinking mind. When you're operating from that consciousness level, you're also operating with authority over your life. These are all, if you've listened from episode 1 to now, these are the words you've heard again, like your authority, being a conscious. Think about it. If you have consciousness and you're not just an operating NPC with that level of confidence, but if you have consciousness and you have deep thought and you have deep connection and understand there's many operating systems happening at the same time, you probably find yourself at a place at a podcast, something like this.
Well, welcome. If you're here, welcome. Bring that critical thinking.
I mean, if you don't critically think, you're not here. We don't even have to have a test. Like, hey, are you a critical thinker? It's like literally, if you're here watching this, you've already have some level of critical thinking because you are able to be like, I'm going to spend time instead of playing Angry Birds or watching the People magazine, People of the Year. I'm going to watch a 3-hour program on that. Or, you know what, if you're here and you're spending your time thinking about this, then you've already shown that you're a critical thinker.
Yeah. And don't berate yourself if you take little breaks from using your critical thinking and reaffirming your own sense of a personal authority. We all need little breaks sometimes, whether it's tuning out to a TV or a phone, fine, do it. But just understand where your priorities are, understand how much time you commit to one thing versus another is important, because if we give too much of our time to our distractions, like the Golden Globes or the Oscars or whatever that may be, you're undermining your ability to exercise your critical thinking.
You're enjoying the circus
Sometimes, yeah,
so to say, and that we all
temper
need
it
this.
though.
I truly believe we need it. I mean, your circuit, you can just spend your time meditating. You don't have to watch the Golden Globes. But if it's something you really like to, it's okay to spend a part of your day where you're doing something a bit mindless, because meditation is not mindlessness. It's very much the opposite. It's deep focus on something spiritual. So, but it's important. I'll watch sports. I watch sports. It's a really fun way for me and my son to bond on a more prime level where we're just rooting for our team, and that's something I enjoy. It really is. You have your sports things you like, and you do other things, but it's okay to have some circus. It's okay to have some, wine.
Yeah, I really think you got to rest your mind sometimes. If you spend all your time just always trying to unravel the mysteries, spend all your time trying to get to the bottom of things or expand your consciousness or meditate deeply, it quite frankly is exhausting. Give yourself a break sometimes. Don't beat yourself up, just don't indulge too much. Got to temper it a little bit.
Yes.
What was our
Um,
guy Billy Carson talking about? This is a guy that kind of hit deep with both of us on a really good podcast. But he was talking about what was consciousness the word we used to describe what he was getting
well,
deep on?
he was on the Sean Ryan show. It's the latest episode. Just pull it up. It's going to be the one that just happened. And when you see this, yeah, it just happened, Jim. Maybe there's another one. You'll see his name in the top, right? But just look Billy Carson, Sean Ryan show, and what was happening there is I'm just gonna now I'm like in my head. Number 93.
All
Number
right, and Sean
93.
Ryan, who may or may not be a CIA operative, but it's not exactly high in our list of concerns because what we're doing is digging into content with our own critical thinking. I'm not worried about a CIA operative brainwashing me because I could discern what makes sense or not.
We discussed this off air before we like kind of I brought it up and I was like, well, this guy could be a CIA operative. Once in the CIA, always in the CIA it's like a kind of a mode of thought. Like you're never out of the what do they call it? They have like a cool name, the company or
The
whatever it's
company,
called.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're never out of the company. And if it
It's
is, it
fun to
is.
tease them too.
But the idea is that like even as a critical thinker, you have to even remember that. I mean, especially if they worked in the CIA and tell you they did, like the things they could be doing is they could be doing some type of disinformation. They could be doing misinformation, malinformation. You don't know what kind of information they're delivering in the words of the New World Order, the way they look at language now.
Yeah, but bro,
It's,
I'll
it's
tell you
categories.
what we don't need is some silicon billionaire telling us what we can and can't listen to. Sean Ryan,
Exactly.
I like to make fun of him sometimes and be like, yeah, this guy might be an operative, but at the same time, I don't give a fuck because quite honestly, I can discern for myself if what I'm hearing is something that I want to indulge in my mental landscape. It's not like I need someone to tell me what I can and can't listen to.
Well, that's a level of consciousness. If you are literally even breaking these things down to like, where's my news source coming from? Instead of like, I'm just listening to a news source. And I say news source because it's a deliverer of information. And that's an important factor. Maybe it's not news. Maybe it's some other, it's an information source. But it's really important to have this discernment because then that starts showing levels of consciousness. It shows you're not operating on some baseline, just going through the program and you just believe everything you see and hear. What's the saying? Believe half of what you believe nothing, half of what you see, nothing of what you hear. Um, it's important. We're just listening to entertainment is the way you could be looking at it. But when you look at and I guess we're now talking about Sean Ryan. We'll get into Billy Carson's episode in a second. But if you look at um his catalog, if you look at his people he's brought on this podcast, 93 podcasts he's done. It's never short form. It's over an hour every episode, and several people he will go multiple episodes. It started out more on the line with operators and special force operators, high level people, high level warriors. It was a lot of it, and then it starts to change, and he starts having other people in, and he starts to change. He does ayahuasca because this is all about consciousness. He does ayahuasca and has a ayahuasca trip, which then changes his life forever, as he seems to find God at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He quits. No, I shouldn't say quit. He hasn't had a drink since. That's the way he always says it. So I
Mm-hmm.
won't change that. But you watch his podcast change to the point where he gets really into pedophilia and the pedophile networks
Go
and
ahead and
these
go ahead and
hunters.
rephrase that, please, would you? It's not that he's into pedophilia.
He gets really into
Let me hear that. Let me hear that one
okay.
more time.
He gets really into exposing that there's deep underground networks of pedophiles out there. We
Don't
didn't think
flag
we
us, YouTube. Don't
we didn't
flag
think
us.
we didn't think we'd be laughing about pedophilia this early in the podcast, but here we are. And well, if you watch this podcast, you've heard how deeply you and I speak about it, and it's kind of a driving force. It's been like, I think, helped me arrive at where I'm at in my journey of consciousness, all of that, because it was like at a young age, I just became aware that like, oh, there's fucking bad MFers out there, dude. There's people that would they'll like, it's what the horror movies are made of. It's
Yeah, the
real
milk
life
carton kids started
in our
with our
lifetime.
generation. That
Yeah.
was when we were kids. We started seeing other kids on the milk carton. You
Is
want to talk about getting a kid to start thinking about weird shit?
is the first kid on a milk carton the guy from Missing whatever that was
Johnny
called?
God?
Or is it Johnny Gott?
Might have been Johnny God, but I can't say for
Or is it
sure.
the guy that started that program where it was like missing persons or unsolved mysteries or something? Remember there was like a program that got huge and then they got rid
Politis,
of it?
missing 411, some
No, I'm going
Politis.
back into the 90s, the TV show.
Oh, yeah, where the
With
host had
John
his own son
Walsh.
kidnapped and murdered. Yeah, yeah,
John
yeah.
Walsh, I think was his
John
name.
Walsh, yeah.
And his son was kidnapped and murdered. And I think then he
Hmm.
starts this program off of it. So these are the things that we've seen in our lifetime where it's like, huh. But the weird thing is when you look into it, you see there's always been this cover up or get in the way of things. And here we are, listen to a guy, Sean Ryan, who was a Navy SEAL. If this is all accurate and it's real, Navy SEAL, was a CIA operator. And but you can do all those things in the name of like what you would believe to be freedom and patriotism, and you could be doing these things and then eventually find out like, oh, I think we might have been doing some maybe not so good stuff too.
Well, let me
And
ask you a question in the context of a show, because you've listened to it more than I have. You've been able to see this guy evolve through these 90 or 100 episodes as he's gone through this span of time where he's doing the show. You've seen him change a little bit and evolve himself.
um kind of, but here's why. He has entered the realm of like when he got out of doing operator stuff, he'd start doing bringing in other people.
Hmm.
And I think he had in the lady who like escaped from North Korea. I don't want to butcher her name or make it
Hmm.
sound like I'm being
That's a
goofy.
good one.
I mean, like he's brought these people in, and it's like it seems like his program is based towards being and this is the crazy thing. This guy's definitely unalived people for his work, for his job, not like a serial killer, but like his job was
What'd
to
you do at work
unalive
today, honey?
people. And things a wife of a special operator would never ask. That's what that question is.
Yeah, yeah.
um but he's a humanitarian. He is really about the human. He's all about like performance and being like, you gotta be tough. You gotta make yourself as tough as you can in this realm. And there's different levels of toughness, but you got to be tough, man, because it's a hard place. And we buttered it down and we made it all soft and cool and sweet. And, it's okay, like with society, but that's all a trick. If the lights go out, that's all a trick. Like,
Yeah, the first rule of survival is to never give in to despair. You have to be mentally prepared to get through something.
I agree with that 100%. I agree with that.
But that's where your toughness comes in too. Even if you can't be physically tough, you might have a body that prohibits that. You might have circumstances that prohibit that. You can always be mentally tough.
You can be tough
And
on other
that's
levels. Yeah.
and that is probably in the world we live in more important than physical toughness.
They're both equally important, but mental toughness is way more important. You're right, because it's this other thing. It's not a muscle that's easily worked on. And when you
Hmm.
start doing this mental toughness, that is literally what will lead you into starting to question, because you're going to question it. Maybe not even interested in it, but you're going to start thinking about consciousness.
Hmm.
Like, hey, who's the observer of all these things? Like, I'm the observer. Well, who's observing me? What? Like, am I the start of all? Wait, everybody else is doing this too. So are they all start of source? Like, what's going on here? It's like we're all one, yet we're all separated by this. And Billy gets into, and it's cool because all it did was layered onto my other information. Where you see Sean is like, he hasn't thought about dimensions, and He hasn't gone
A
deep
little bit, because he had
consciousness.
Stephen Greer on there, and they talked about some of that business. So he's been introduced to it, I'd say, but he's sure no expert. But
Definitely
Bill,
introduced.
Billy Carson tried to open his mind a little more on that topic, and he did a good job of it, explaining this idea of dimensions.
Yeah, because he's much different than Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer is a bit different. He's a little bit more academic. No, see, because Billy is super academic. Like all his stuff's coming from like books and information
I think Greer just
and
has a
stuff.
very singular focus.
He seems more like laboratory lab coat. Like he should have a lab coat on and like pocket protector. He kind of has that vibe. He has a vibe of. This will be a callback. Doctor, who's the bodybuilder substitute teacher we had? He was like French with the blonde curly hair. He's
Oh man, I
jacked.
remember that guy. What was
Mr.
his name?
Universe a bunch of times. He's like Mr. Universe in like the
Yeah, he was a sub
70s or
teacher for
60s.
us.
I can't think of his name, but him, he
I
always
remember the guy
reminds me
though.
of him of like don't fuck around with this guy. This guy is like business, like
Well, that's Stephen Greer too. Like
yeah,
he's 60 something years old and he's all jacked up muscle man. I mean,
yeah. With
he's a big dude. He's a very fit dude. He's a very smart guy. He's got a lot going on. When I say he seems to be a little more singular in his focus, like he's all about the UFO phenomenon and the free energy systems that come with it.
yes,
And whereas Billy Carson, he's consciousness, he's dimensions, he's Anunnaki and ancient history and pyramids and all kinds of stuff. Like he's across the whole board. It surprised me he was even on the Sean Ryan show, because his show can be a little more down to earth, and Billy Carson
analytical.
is anything but down to earth.
Bro, it was really one of my favorite podcasts. And it was literally, we're supposed to be talking about consciousness, but it was because it was like how deep he went into the pyramids and like are these things and why are they all over, and then the measurements, and he's not like just Johnny Hippie. This guy's giving you detailed information, uh very much so. It's very much like a college course you're listening to, almost, you feel like, the way he speaks.
He's
Whereas like
really smart.
a student might yell out, well, do you have a slide or thing for that? And he, like, for this time, he was like, my projector's out, I don't have the slides with me, but I do have all that. And go to billycarson.com, and or no, it's a frontier of knowledge or whatever his channel is. I can't remember.
Yeah, but any Billy Carson presentation in the past has been full of backing information and sources and slides and pictures. No, he backs up the talk that he's doing.
So in this, he's, like you said, he's talking Anunnaki. He's talking, I think, ruling families. I think he's talking
Oh, interstellar
education.
ruling families, bro. Like
Yes,
really,
deep. So
yeah, way out.
he really exits the room and like takes you to a bigger room to talk and think about things with Antarctica um and pyramids. We already said that. I'm like just running short on it. Was like
No, the ancient Sumerian myths, ancient Egypt, Atlantis. Like
it's a
when he talks about world history, he goes back tens of thousands of years. Like he's talking about um, who the Egyptians themselves called their rulers. There's this funny phenomenon with Western historians. They accept Egyptian history up to a point about 4,500 years ago, or 4,500 BC or something like that. And like, this is where Egypt started. But the Egyptians themselves, like, no, actually, if you look at their records, their history goes back something like 36,000 years or 36,000 BC. And they give their king's list. But the reason the Western academics reject it is because the kings back in those days lived for 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 years, things like that. And our Western academics are like, well, that's obviously where they start to make up their history, and we're the authorities. We'll tell you where they actually began their history. But Carson's not afraid to go there. He looks at what the Egyptians said and what the Emerald Tablets at Thoth said, and all these other histories like the King's List from the Sumerian history, and he has that built into his mythology. So when you listen to him, he's like, no, when this guy was ruling Egypt and it was 36,000 BC, it was called Kem, and this is where they lived, and these were the circumstances. He goes deep.
Yes. Yeah, he definitely calls it the land of Chem. He covers all he obviously in this 3-hour podcast, which took me 4 hours to listen to, which I don't mean I reversed this thing I was going back in time on this podcast over and over to like digest because it was just like it pours on you, dude, the information. But yeah, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the other Sumerian texts. He goes deep into like bringing up just a couple of them, but that shatters the whole history timeline. Enoch, the book of Enoch, it's only in one Bible still. That's in Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
Every other Bible has removed the book of Enoch, along with like 46 other books, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
to make up the current King James Bible. So how much information did they're just like, no, you don't need this.
Yeah, King
Um,
James, the King of England from what, the 1600s? Like that's your authority on what happened thousands of years ago. Come on.
Enoch, Enlil, Enki. It goes into these things I've heard so many times in so many different places over the course of these years while I've had this it all literally starts as um really a question about what is consciousness. That's where like all the conspiracy theories, this whole like realm of conspiracy, how I got there is once I was about expanding my consciousness or learning what consciousness is. And this was both of us in like extremely similar period. We were like overlapping each other while we were doing this and starting to learn about consciousness and what is consciousness, and which leads you down a manyfold path, my friend. And this is in 1994. Here we are in 2024. That was 30 years ago. We were starting our expansion of consciousness, or
It did,
our
because when
search
you
of.
when you look at books like that, Celestine Prophecy, it told you a fantastic tale. It talked all about energy, but it was primarily about consciousness. And I think that was the running theme for that kind of literature. Here's a guy you'll remember. I won't drop his name, but you remember the doctor from Steamboat Springs. I remember he was a Buddhist guy who meditated, and he was very serious about his Buddhism. He was pals with Tim and Chris,
Okay.
and
Okay.
he was at our house, and he looked at the bookshelf, and it was all like Celestine Prophecy and Tribe of the Bird People and all these fanciful books. And he looked at it, and you could just see the contempt in his face. He's like, these fucking clowns. But what he failed to realize is those books are just another version of regurgitating the same information that's in his Buddhist text.
Mm-hmm.
It's esoteric information that's repackaged, and he couldn't see it. But that's what it was all about. All that like mind expansion, all those mind expanding stories of the 90s were all about expanding consciousness. All that stuff about other dimensions and a golden age and an age of Aquarius that was really well established by the time we stumbled upon it, always was about consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm breaking it all back. I'm breaking it down. That's why I guess I formatted them that way. It was like, hey, no, we weren't searching for that. We were like literally started having questions about like what's more than this. Wait, what's going on here? Like this isn't, we're not apes that evolved to be this without being there was a manipulation. Like it's very confusing, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
I
why you start to look outside the box, and that's when I started to explore consciousness,
mhm,
which you could deem as spirituality,
mhm,
which just means incorporeality. It means you're looking into the incorporeal things without a body. That's what spiritual is. And that's when
interesting.
that leads you right into consciousness, because that's what kind of happened.
Yeah.
And you start going to the bookstores and you start trying to understand this, and here we are 30 years later when we started our study and looking at consciousness, and we've gone so deep in so many different ways that it's led us to trying to understand like how to break it down. Like, what does this mean? Like, when you speak of consciousness, is this, it's like, do I have consciousness? But then what about, does Matt have his own consciousness? And it's, you start to understand there's shared consciousnesses, or consciousness. And then there's this more of a localized or personal consciousness,
Hmm.
but none of it is any different from the whole of the whole, uh, what would lead into the other dimensions, because it's really only dimensions are the dividing line of those consciousnesses. As you go through the different dimensions, you start finding yourself in different realms that open up doors and windows to places you didn't even know were available. It's like there was a fake wall in front of you, and then the wall is pulled back, and you go, "Oh my gosh, I have 11 doors."
Yeah, yeah. And as Billy explained too, that I think we've all come across this information previously, but he did a good job of summing it up, was that these dimensions all exist simultaneously in the same place and they're difference of vibration.
Hmm.
And while there are sounds right now that dogs can hear, but we can't, that sound exists in the same space we're in. And it's a good analogy for these dimensions. That dimension exists in the same space we're in, whether it's whatever number you feel like picking. I think Billy was saying that physics has identified 11 dimensions that are necessary for our universe to exist. But the point is, if a dog can hear a sound that we can't, and if your infrared camera can pick up something visual that we can't, it goes, that's the analogy of these dimensions. You're just vibrating at a frequency that doesn't pick up those other dimensions. But if you could change your frequency to match the frequency of another dimension, then you could travel from this one to that one. And in theory, that's where wonderful things can happen if you could tap into those other higher dimensions.
Yes, because we are here in this current time. You're watching this podcast, you're listening to this podcast, you're in the third dimension. We're in a shared third dimensional space. Like you said, it's not in a different time. It's not a layered amount of time. It's a layered amount of space, but space doesn't even matter because it's not in anywhere. It just is. Uh, when you start to in the third dimension, we have certain properties that we're aligned to. Now, in this dimension, when you see the miraculous, if you're not being just fooled by smoke and mirrors, you're not just being fooled by actual trickery, but you ever witness any type of it could be ghosts or whatever, some type of apparition or some type of incredibly deep spiritual experience where maybe you almost feel like God's talking to you or something, like all these things. A lot of that's all just because now that higher levels of consciousness beyond the third, because once you get past the third, it's a threshold. This place is a literal threshold that holds everything below it and into it. 1 to 3, first, second, and third dimension are all like layered upon each other. The lower dimensions can't escape to the higher, just one of the ways it is until they can, which would mean they're not trapped in one dimension. They can go to the second, go to the third, but it's very much a box, the third dimension. It's what makes the third dimension the thing is it's a box. And the wild thing is outside of that box, it turns into the universe. It goes 4 to 11, like, like almost immediately.
Hmm.
Not meaning you can just reach the 11th dimension, because you might have to find your way to it or through it, or to even stand under the know that you're in it.
Are you saying the barriers are less between these higher
Yes.
dimensions?
As soon as you leave the third, fourth, because it's space and time. So now you leave these confines of these like laws, these weird seeming laws that aren't
Hmm.
really laws. They just apply to that dimension, and they're laws in that dimension, but they can be bypassed by higher dimensions. So yeah, once you get to 4, it just goes like it's not like, just to have the realization that there's a dimension beyond the third is like the entrance to this consciousness. That's the question of like, wait, there's something beyond this. Once
Hmm.
you have that question, there's something beyond this, you start to have access now, because you wouldn't just know it in the third dimension. You wouldn't just know there's an Akashic records, that there's an ultimate library of information and knowledge of all things that have happened, all things that will ever happen, right there. It's right at your fingertips. But
Right, but your consciousness hasn't yet crossed the barrier, so you're not conscious of things in that dimension.
exactly. So you have it's a ladder, But once you reach past that third, that means you've now broken out, because the confines of the third are extremely strong in their properties of the physical nature.
Mhm.
So much so that we have science and whole laboratories and billions and trillions of dollars being spent on science, in these laboratories, but it's all mostly just third dimensional. But
Mhm.
once you go to a place called like CERN, where they take 3D science and then apply it to the principles of ancient knowledge, and they start trying to smash things into each other through the large, was it called the
Hadron Collider.
large hadron collider,
Hadron Collider, yeah.
hadron collider. um I mean, Billy Carson starts speaking about, because this is all, because once you get into dimensions, consciousness, they're hand in hand, they're holding hands. This is where you start opening up portals. You start trying to like see how you could step through the dimensions. What Einstein, looked at, or he theorized about it, but he could never prove it, was that time could fold upon itself, because time's not linear. Space is space, time is time, and time can fold in on itself past space, and so you can bypass space and step through time from one place to another and get out of the way of, like, what would the trip from here to Mars be in physical meters? Well, that you can bypass that. You could fold the meters, and you can bring point A to point B and
Yeah,
touch
that
them.
actually needs a little quick explaining because consciousness is the key to this business that Einstein was talking about. You hear about well, how about this? This third dimension is made up of empty space because your body is atoms and the nucleus of an atom in your body and the electrons swirling around it, it's mostly empty space to the point that I forget what the numbers are, but if you're a nucleus in an atom in your body was an orange, then the electrons are a couple miles away from you. So you're nothing but empty space. But here's the rub. What we think of as empty space, like the air between me and this camera, is not empty space. We know there's oxygen there, so there's things. You go into actual space, it's not empty space either because there's this web of energy that everything is connected through a network of energy. So what you basically have is the empty space. It's connected by these really tiny little bits of energy that are your atoms. And no matter where you go in the universe, that network is there. And the catch of it all is the network is accessible to consciousness at any point in time, at any point in space. So when you hear things like a wormhole, or you watch Dune and they talk about folding space, it's like, don't think of these as transport mechanisms. What you have to think of it as is everything is connected and consciousness has access to all of it. So if you can put your consciousness in another place in the universe, then you are just automatically there. And if you can evolve that skill to some level, then you could take the atoms of your body and put them there, or a spaceship, or whatever it is. So the whole universe is a network of connected energy, and the whole network of connected energy is accessible to consciousness. All you have to do is project your consciousness, and believe me, this piece of cake, do it all the time. That's how I move my bunker to the fifth dimension. No, all kidding aside, that's the mechanism of it. You put the consciousness at any space and time, and then you can be there.
Yes, because there is not actually any space or time that divides or separates us.
It's all
Um,
connected and it's all tied by consciousness.
the space that you spoke of that are between all the things,
Mm-hmm.
in Ayurveda, they call that ether.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ethers. The ethers is spoken about many times, but it's a really hard concept to understand. I remember listening to Sam Tripoli or having him ask me personally, just like, what's ether? I was like, it's the space between the space, bro. It's like the space between the atoms. Like, what's there between the neutron and the electron and the proton? What's in there? What's holding that so it doesn't collapse? It's space. It's not air. It's not hydrogen. It's not oxygen, because these are molecules. We're talking about the things that make up the hydrogen, and it's ether. Um,
But that energy grid connects, that space is an energy grid that is
yes.
interspersed through everything.
The ethers would be, I believe, the ethers would be what the fractals are kind of making themselves out of. That's the interconnectedness between the things that would be in the way that make the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if you and I are basically nothing, but we're a projection of a certain level of protons, electrons, neutrons, and all that showing itself, that becomes an object. Yet, because of the, like, why can't you put your hand just through the wall? You know, as Billy starts to talk about those things, like, he has a different explanation, but to me, it's because there's ether. There's other properties there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
ether seems like nothing, but it's still something. It's like, it's it's still, it's not like powerless just because you can't see it or touch it or feel it or.
True. And also, if your vibration is of the third dimension, then you're going to operate on the laws of that dimension. Like I might
Yes.
joke that, I could send my bunker to the fifth dimension, but of course, I'm within the bounds of the vibration of the third dimension. But the idea, of course, is that if you had a vibration of one of those higher dimensions and you were present in the third dimension, then those rules no longer apply to you. You can put your hand through that wall.
Uh-huh. What if every time you'd be like, let's just say you tried an experiment where you stood near a wall or
Mm-hmm.
an item. You stood near an item, you said, I'm going to, like, because when you get into the start learning about consciousness, you start being like, why can't I put my hand through the wall?
Mm-hmm.
Because I understand that the wall isn't solid. The wall is this thing, right? So every time you've done that, think of it this way. If you didn't have complete experience of you putting your hand through the wall, or we'll just say in this case the wall,
Mm-hmm.
it's because you're just having a 3D experience still. It's not to say when you did that, there also in some other dimension, your hand goes through the wall. You're just not connected to that place. So you don't have that experience. So every time you did that, you literally did put your hand through a wall. But you also didn't put your hand through the wall because you were still in the 3D consciousness level. You're still locked into this 3D prison of rules and laws that they've set in
Yeah,
place
now you're
for you.
going into like alternate realities, bro. We're gonna
But
we're
that's
gonna go off the
dimensions.
deep end if you go there.
Alternate realities is just dimensions, bro. Because think, what would be an opposite, a different reality than the reality you're having now? Because the reality you're having right now is a third dimensional reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're here, we're cameras sending fucking shit through wires, and it's somehow getting here. Like, what? Like, you're somehow the images, what? Okay, and we're saving it on the cloud. All right. This is all in the third dimension. We're doing these weird fourth dimensional practices. Like, putting things on the information on the cloud is fourth and fifth and sixth. It's higher level dimensional consciousness of placing things on clouds, information on
That's a cool way of
clouds.
thinking about it.
But we're doing it in the 3D because there is somewhere that they're putting this, unless they're literally taking it, charging us money, and they're putting it in the ethers, and they know how to get it back out of the ethers. And they're like, yeah, actually, this is great. We don't pay for electricity storage.
Well, I hate to be a bummer, but there's stuff about the computers and the information. It could also be a 2D thing because it's all stored in zeros and ones. It's a bunch of binary codes.
Or is that one? No, because I guess it's more than one because you had 0 and 1. So
Yeah.
that would mean it's 2. It's the second dimension. Yeah, I have no problem with that. Like, that's the funny thing to me is I watch really smart people think that like putting all your money into like third dimensional technology will
Mm-hmm.
free you and then move you on, right? Like in some weird, they have some weird sci-fi movie that they're making that's like, no, this is how we do it. This is how we move on humanity. It's like, and it really bums me out
Hmm.
because we don't need the 3D computer technology. That's all nice. They're really great tools. This is the way that me and my best friend can communicate over a long distance, record it, and then put it onto a podcast. But we don't, we didn't need this the whole time. You can just be, like you said, you can just be there. People heal people over time. Like, just get on the phone with somebody, and then just because of that connection, they can heal over long, like thousands of miles. You can do long distance healing sessions. You can do,
That's the thing because everything is technically connected because it's all the same base layer energies. All
yeah,
when you look at what binds what makes up the nucleus, the protons and the electrons and all that, there's an energy field there that is all those things, and it is all connected, and consciousness has access to it all. So when who was that Virginia Beach psychic who talked about Atlantis and did all the
Edwin
healings?
Casey, Edgar
Yeah,
Casey.
yeah. When Casey was doing his remote healing, he didn't have to go somewhere because he was already connected to them. And when you see those, when you hear stories of yogis who can be in two places at once, or who can walk through walls or levitate, it's because they're vibrating at a higher dimension than the third, and they no longer operate at the rules of the third dimension.
I think it's Swami Shri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda speaks of.
He's a good one, yeah.
Is he the one that I think like all of a sudden he just appeared, or was it Lahiri Mahasaya, or was it like Babaji?
Um,
It was in that
it-
series of books. If you read into those books, you find there was a time where like one of these high level spiritual adepts, and spiritual's not the right, because they were very religious, strictly religious adepts of the yoga traditions,
yeah.
mostly Ashtanga yoga, and they were very diehard. And I'm going to tell you right now, you want to learn about raising your consciousness,
Hmm.
study the Yoga Sutras of
Study
Patanjali.
Yoga Sutras.
Study
Okay.
the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I tell you that right now, because all it is a code of things you can do as a human that
Hmm.
will only make your life immediately better. Immediately and deeply better. You will find things about yourself, and you will start to understand you have strengths that you never even knew you had power in.
Can you do that as a self practice, or do you need to learn from someone who is adept at it?
No, because if you can adhere to a school of yoga, you can do it as self-study.
Hmm.
Having someone describe things to you is, listen, always having an outside perspective of just reading a book can always be very helpful, because now it's another set of eyes, it's another set of consciousness expressing itself, and
Hmm.
it can be powerful to have somebody that maybe you vibrate towards, and then it allows you to get a little bit freer than you would be. Maybe you because you can trust somebody, you can get a little deeper, but it always ends with a guru. The guru, you have to move beyond. Like, the guru is only a teacher.
Hmm.
They're not and unfortunately our egos get involved, and then we start to think the teacher is the focus of the whole thing, and that shouldn't be what they're even thinking, and I doubt they are, unless they have misaligned attentions or hidden
No, because ultimately it's an
intentions.
internal journey. The student
Yes.
is ultimately the focus of the teaching.
So you can literally just go get the book, order the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, read them, and you will be amazed with the way you can change your life,
Hmm.
just because it's a code. There's human codes that have been put out to help us raise ourselves into higher consciousnesses. Because when you read these books, you start to understand these esoteric, these gnostic at times, these hidden wisdom, because they're not taught to you in school. That's the part that what makes it hidden. If it was taught in school, it wouldn't be hidden. Like,
Hmm.
everybody could know, like, after you eat, you should go for a walk, short walk around the block, literally. But like, little things like that put
Hmm.
your state in a better digestive state. Now your body is doing a better job digesting. Now you don't need to spend as much energy doing that, because it's not fighting an uphill battle. But it's also going to get into things to eat, the way to think, the way to be. I'm sure the yamas and the niyamas are probably all hidden, like put right in there, like the code of ethics for life. If you're trying to become a more evolved being, physically, mentally, spiritually,
Hmm.
if you're trying to evolve your consciousness, there's tons of text to look into. And I literally talk about Hinduism a lot because it's what I got into the most, because it seemed to be the oldest. Because there's Buddhism, but the Buddha was a Hindu, so that means before him they were already doing this stuff, and he's just an expression of this stuff, just like you would.
Right. Right.
Like, we if you look at Hinduism, we're all, we're all just trying to be Buddhists, because we're all just trying to become some like really good level of this thing, this way of study, this way of understanding. Dude, that's how they knew about ethers, because they knew about the cells. How did they know about the cells without textbooks?
Yeah, ancient Baghdad, they knew about atoms.
How did they
They
know this?
wrote about it.
Yeah, they didn't have microscopes, they didn't have atomic microscope, or microscopes get down to like atomic level to see what's
No,
going.
you said it before. In
It's because
those
it's
other
written.
dimensions, you have things like
Yeah.
the Akashic records.
Yeah.
And
Once they're,
don't
yeah.
let the words throw you for a loop or anything. Akashic records is just another way of saying there's data available if you have a higher vibration.
Yes. It's a place that has a storage of knowledge that can be reached by anywhere. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to travel to the Akashic records. The Akashic records travel to you
Mm-hmm.
once you access them. And I can be accessing them, and you can be in Colorado where you're at, and you can be accessing them at the same time. How does that happen, dude? There's one library. No, dude, it's just information. It's just stored information that's stored into the consciousness. And if you can reach those levels of consciousness, you can reach those storages of information. That's how they knew about the atom. That's why they have ether. We growing up, four elements:
Mm-hmm.
air, earth, fire, water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hindus have the same thing, but with the fifth, ether.
Nice.
Yeah, ether's written right in. They're like, no, this is a complete element. This is the thing that holds the other things together. This is the transformer of information, or the transmitter of information. Not
Yeah.
transmitter.
No, Western sciences had ether too, but as like those Rockefeller funded educational systems started to take hold in this country in the early 1900s, that all got taken out. Same as holistic medicine got removed and it got replaced with allopathic medicine. Sciences, medicine, the fifth element, all this stuff got removed from our education. And it's a shame it did because things like Tesla had tapped into the 0 point energy field. That's free energy. Once you tap into it with a device that can harvest that energy, it can power itself and continue to make more energy than it takes to run the device. Unlike running something on a gas generator. No, it was all it's that was one of the things when you listen to Sean Ryan show with Stephen Greer, he has a show called The Lost Century. All these sciences were available 100 years ago, but they were suppressed so that people who were making money off the system as it is with selling oil, selling electricity, they um, they suppressed the free energy that was available to us, and we've been suffering ever since. Um, Not to get too far away from our talk about consciousness, though, that field of study is another one that's like you wish you could learn more about it in traditional education, but it's just not really a thing. You have to go to what in America would be a fringe element. You got to go to a Hindu or Buddhist school. You have to go to, find a guru where you can. But I think it's just really hard to go it alone. Although you have said it's possible, and I get it. But I'm a great example. I'm a thinker. I think about consciousness. I understand what critical thinking is, but I don't have any of this ability to access these um, these higher dimensions. I'm quite on the other side of this barrier of the third dimension, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that our education is so limited. Um, you can't uh, you can't expect a person to be adept at raising a vibration and expanding their consciousness if your entire early life is spent without any learning about those things. So it's a conundrum we're in. Again, to repeat, you and I were just in this position where we are on the third dimensional side of the barrier. And while there might be little peaks to the other side, we certainly don't have any access to that other side of that barrier to those higher dimensions. Have you ever thought about what it is that prevents you or us or people like us from having access to those dimensions? Is it just our history and our upbringing? What do you think it is?
Ask that question again, right?
Yeah, what do
But
you
just
think
the
it is
first
that?
part. Don't worry about the giving me examples. Ask
All
that
right, what do you
question
think
again.
it is that prevents us from accessing higher vibrations, higher dimensions?
Maya,
Maya.
the illusion of the illusion that is the third dimension.
So the third dimension existence itself is what's preventing us. It's a
It's
good sell. I mean, it's very real.
it's so power. Maya is so powerful that it tricks you to forgetting what you just learned about consciousness. You can like hear something so powerful, like listening to Billy Carson speak about consciousness at the end of that podcast, where he goes in for maybe 15 minutes about consciousness and really breaks it down into dimensions and the difference of locality and how we see there's a difference between us and time and space. And he breaks it all down and you listen to it all. And I'm listening to it going, oh my God, I can excel now. And then you're not listening. And then the illusion takes over and you somehow start forgetting to think that it's all fractals of light. It's all just consciousness. This is all just levels of a program we're running, and it's only at a certain level, it's a certain dimension, and I operate from the highest dimension ever, but I've just forgotten my way there, and I'm stuck here. That's why I said it's a box. Third dimension's a box that you're trapped in. The whole thing is there's no actual walls to the box. You just
Right.
believe there's walls. Once you get beyond those believed walls of this level, the Maya, the illusion of this
Yeah.
realm, the wall is an illusion that we believe in so much you'll break your illusionary hand if you punch it.
Yeah. Yeah. So the phone rings, you get hungry, you punch the wall, all these things. That's Maya
Maya.
doing its thing to keep you from realizing your other
Yeah.
dimensional potential.
Bro, they could distract you with a butterfly and a sunset and a rainbow too, where
Good
you're
point.
literally
Yeah, man.
seeing
All right.
those things. But if you can remember to see those things as what they may be, think about like Indians. When I say Indians, let's think about, we're not going to talk about Hindu Indians now, even though they're probably related and come from the same freaking tribe in the beginning. But we'll say like North America, the American Indians, like from coast to coast, California to the East Coast, Atlantic Ocean. Those guys would see things in the universe and they knew the code. That means this. That means this. Hawk means that.
Hmm.
Wolf means this. It's an energy expression of the universe. Think of these people had such a deep understanding and knowledge of the 3D Maya that they could see that would remind them that there's something way more going on.
Oh, so they apply symbology to everything they see, and it reminds them to think of those higher dimensions and not the Maya itself.
Yes, and that's what religion does. Religion's supposed to do the same thing. All religions are very different, yet very similar in so many different ways, but some are way more into like seeing everything around you and having kind of like understanding that's an aspect of that, that's an aspect of this. This is the God speaking to me through 3D physical imagery.
Hmm.
um and you could see that in Hinduism as well. Hindus are really big into that, but just I know we know about it growing up here, that we know when you see like, oh, American Indian would see a hawk and that would be a symbol of something for them
Oh
that
yeah,
was
bro. I have my
understanding.
animal speak book. Every time I get a close encounter with something, some wild animal, I'll flip that book open to its page and look at what the symbology is. I love that.
People are drawn to these things, like, and it's like that's without knowledge because it just comes into you. It's like it's already been programmed into your system, that knowledge.
Hmm.
That's why we stop and we go, oh my God, nature. And you're like, that's amazing. It's like, but what does it mean?
Mm.
Like, what is it trying to tell you? What were you just thinking about? What were you just doing? What is this equal to that? And that's when you start, that's breaking free of this third dimensional consciousness, because now you start to put God in all things, because now that's when the mysticism and the mystical things happen. All of a sudden it'll be like life becomes alive with magic,
Mm. Well,
because
in the
you're not,
meantime,
yeah.
bro, Maya's got a another crazy trick up its sleeve in that it confines our consciousness to the bodies we inhabit. Because I could look at a sunset and see it, but I'm not it. I don't feel my consciousness there. You could project yourself a little bit, but
I
yeah.
definitely feel like I can project myself during those moments, a time when I have the awareness, like I have a conscious level to go, oh, this can be deeper than that. Like, yeah, I'm watching this, but what does that represent? And that's part of like in Hinduism specifically, they have a lot of ritual. The rituals are all to like remind, like bathing. What does that mean? Like it's cleansing. What does cleansing mean? It's like, so you can tie a lot of basic, you could just wash your hands and have this really basic religious experience, meaning linking to some higher dimensional idea, philosophy, and start to experience it, because that's the cool thing about us. We can either put on holographic eyewear that then somehow make us see into some like virtual reality, or we could look into the virtual reality that's beyond our reality without putting anything on, only just removing all the bullshit that we have, all the illusion we placed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Well, Billy
it's
Carson got our gears turning, that's for sure, man.
I feel like I could literally just do a podcast about that. Like, I mean, kind of did cover little bits, but it's like that podcast had, this is what our podcast is about. Like, if you listen to that podcast, it's this reduced version of us getting deep into all those things over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
Pyramids.
There's so yeah, and you know, the alternate history timeline, or maybe more like the classical timeline of history, is just got full of holes and people have crushed it. There's so much you got into that's so much fun to talk about. But you know, today was consciousness, and consciousness is a great avenue to explore. That is a great topic to talk about because it's the key to the universe. And goddamn, buddy, it's a shame we don't have that key, but
Yeah.
get a little closer every day.
What if we see conscious, like right now, since the change of the year, and obviously before the changing of this new year in this Gregorian calendar to Gregory, what if before like you see consciousness coming out in the news? Because we have our, you know, we usually do it, so we're gonna do break the news. Breaking news, everybody. um we have it's kind of it's silly, but it's like consciousness showing itself is the way I feel.
How do you mean? Well, I'm
Cincinnati,
sorry.
Cincinnati.com. That's a news organization,
Mhm.
Cincinnati. Home Depot is selling medieval swords, and the online comments are fire. I'm not going to go to the comments because I mean, maybe we'll make our way to them, but it's like Home Depot's doing what? And if you
Home Depot is
really,
selling
swords,
medieval swords.
medieval swords,
Yeah, yeah.
fashioned after the character Braveheart, Mel Gibson plays in Braveheart. I'm
Oh, a
sorry,
big sword too.
Wallace, 40 inches. That's like
That's
3.5 feet almost.
yeah, that's a lot of sword.
Oh yeah, you could swing that, and it says on it, reclaim your on the box. Like it says, reclaim your freedom from the tyrannical English king with this authentic William Wallace sword. That's its item's description. Um, I'm gonna be honest with you. At first thing you hear this, and you're like, what? And then I was immediately like, yeah, like why hasn't Home Depot been selling swords? Like, why isn't there like a whole, if this place is for dudes, and yeah, I guess it's for home improvement and all, but every home
Mhm.
needs a sword. Uh why is there not a sword aisle? And like some armor, like battle armor, like you can get some like good stuff you can just go in and buy, like some why? If this is the ultimate, because as a guy, you go in the Home Depot. Okay, here's a question. Maybe this is, I've heard it. Maybe when you go in the Home Depot, you go in the
Yeah.
Lowe's. It's pretty awesome experience.
When you just go into Home Depot, sure, man.
Just
Power
looking
tools and
around,
hand
like,
tools and
yeah.
fucking
Say
lawnmowers, grills. I love that place.
you need a box of nails. You know the nails you need. You go in and grab them, but you got an hour to kill. So you're like not worried about they're gonna be sold out on nails. I'm gonna get my nails, and then you can just walk around Home Depot with the tools and the plumbing and the electrical and the wood.
And then armor and
Wood.
swords.
But if there was an island that had armor and swords, bro, why that? This could be the greatest thing ever. They're probably only gonna like you probably have to just order it and then it's like you pick it up. But I think they should have a sword aisle because that's a tool. Swords, axes.
I'm gonna withhold from the 18 things I want to say about why that's a terrible idea, but fun idea. I'll give you credit. It's a fun idea. And why do you think that was something to do with expanding consciousness, though? Was there a little nugget hidden in there, or are you just having fun because it's some silly shit the Home Depot is selling a broadsword to kill the English king with?
Yeah, I think that's a raising of the consciousness.
And
I
kill the
think
king.
because it's hard to find swords. It's not like you can go online and look, but you don't know what kind of quality you're getting. You don't
No.
know. You don't have a place you can return it to if your sword breaks because you hit the king and it broke. And you're like, ah, it's bullshit, dude. This was only 30 years, it's 28 days old. I got my warranty. You could take the hilt back and you're like, I don't have the blade. Okay, it's in the king. No, I think it's a change in the consciousness because we're seeing like that seems like why wouldn't have Home Depot always had like a good machete, knives, like a whole okay. In my local hardware store where my dad lived in his town, okay.
No.
In there was knife cases and knives. They might have bows and arrows. That was a local hardware store. They had camouflage clothing and things like that. Like why they should be selling that too. I think Home
Well,
Depot
here,
do
when I
better.
look at my list of 18 items, number one is there's not enough market for it. And number two is you make no money on selling swords in Home
How?
Depot.
You don't
I'm
know
sorry to
that?
I'm sorry to break the news to you. The reasons 3 to 18 are similar too. I think it's funny that Home Depot is selling swords. I think that your dad's hardware store back in the day, yeah, there was a case for pocket knives and you could get a machete and shit like that there.
Mhm.
Um,
Swords,
but
but they didn't.
believe
They
me,
had
if
they
Home
had
Depot makes
bows.
money off this shit, they will expand that section.
That hardware store sold bows and guns, crossbows, bows, guns, fishing stuff. Like Home Depot should just like try to cap because they're probably hurting a little bit. They should like say fuck Bass Pro. They should like take back a little bit and like
Go head to head
expand.
with Cabela's.
Yeah, go get, fucking fill some of those aisles up better, dude. The ceilings are high. Make it 2 levels. First level, that shit, and then above it, because the ceilings are high as fuck, bro. And then the other level could just be a fucking. You have a shooting range up there, bows, arrows, everything. Not
Did all
listen.
your fun stuff.
Yeah, because now you don't have to go to Cabela's. You don't have to go to Bass Pro.
All right. The future of Home Depot, people. You heard it here first at Agents of Aquarius, episode 18, baby.
I don't even think we have to end on something positive because I think just Home Depot selling swords is a positive message. I think that's a positive message, dude, in this world. We need more swords.
All right, my friend, keep your sword sharp. Everyone out there listening, keep your sword sharp. Get yourself to Home Depot. Get yourself a good weapons grade piece of steel. And when the zombie apocalypse happens, you'll be chopping off heads left, right, and center.